in the name of family law.
Today we're going to talk about the many issues that have arisen with parenting time cases since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm here with Kent Wood, a family law attorney with offices in Lansing and Battle Creek, and he is the managing partner and owner of Wood & Associates. We're so glad to have you, Kent.
Oh, thank you.
So let's get started with some quick help us understand what was going on at the beginning of the pandemic, and then we can talk about what is happening today as far as the rules and regulations governing family law cases and specifically parenting time.
Okay. Well, the beginning of the pandemic, I would say, kind of that January 2020 through March 30, 2020, the first 3 months, we're not sure if what's going to happen with school. Kids going to go home? Are people going to be at work? We started getting all kinds of calls in terms of how is parenting time going to change? Are we going to have to let my child go back and forth? Well, the Supreme Court actually issued kind of a general statement saying in March of 2020 saying, hey, look, you got to follow court orders, right? You got to follow parenting time orders. There was even the state governor, she issued some restrictions, but one of the exceptions was traveling between two homes so that parenting time could continue. And so that's kind of where things were at when things had started. And
then what is now 18 months into this, is there anything different? Are we still supposed to be following court orders, for example?
Oh, yes, we're definitely always supposed to be following court orders. Things are different because I guess, we're trying to go back to school right now. Some of the things that are happening right now that I know of is I've got an employee whose child went back to school, but now that child is on 14 days quarantine. So now we have to figure out for her how to do work schedule for her. And fortunately, she's not dealing with a parenting time situation. But another client of ours, well, not a client of ours, what did I say, this teacher friend, has said when she started school on week one, my kids go to school, and so week one, the desks were all together, 4 to a spot. Week 2, the staff suggested, hey, maybe if you want, separate the desks. Week 3, they're saying you have to separate desks, keep space. She feels that there's going to likely be sending kids home again.
Right, which is going to affect not only the workers, and their jobs, but also parenting time when there's issues. So, let's talk a little bit about the kinds of calls that both of us have been getting from parents, often panicked calls, when they have issues arise in their family that are somehow related to COVID-19 and parenting time.
Well, the first one is when a child has to be quarantined. If the child has to be quarantined, the call is, do I let the child go to see the other parents still?
And what's the answer to that?
The answer is yes. You have to follow the order unless the order changes.
Even if they have COVID-19, the other parent would have to go to court.
Yes.
To keep them in their house during that 14-day quarantine period?
Yes. If you're asking me if the child had the actual COVID, yes, because as a parent, you're supposed to be fit enough to take care of a child, healthy or sick. And if the child, and I kind of give advice to clients that if your child's so ill that they can't travel to the other parent's house, that child probably needs to be at the hospital because it's a serious thing if you can't even do that.
And Kent, what about the parent who has COVID-19, not the child? So if one household, there's somebody in the household, maybe a parent, who has it and the other household doesn't, what's the rule then?
Well, the rule is always follow a court order, unfortunately, but it's become reasonable. And another piece of advice I give is you got to follow the order, but here's a little tip. If you were still a couple, what would you do in this situation? Mm-hmm. You're not a couple. There's a lack of trust. There's all kinds of issues going on there. It could be very highly contested. But if you were a couple, what would you do? If you can't physically take care of your child, try to arrange things so that you can be with the other parent.
So and if a parent, let's say in the house that does not have COVID, is concerned about exposing their child to the parent who does have COVID, that parent is going to have to go get a court order to prevent that parenting time from happening. But I think what you're trying to say is the parent with COVID, let's just be reasonable, folks.
Right.
Judges want to see parents being reasonable and working with each other during these very trying times, I guess I should say. And maybe you're not required to lose your parenting time because you have COVID, but maybe it's better for the family to do so, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So another issue that I've heard come up during COVID-19 pandemic is when the parenting time is having to occur out of state, because one parent lives in California or Montana or Texas. What issues have you heard about and helped clients with regarding out-of-state travel?
Well, out-of-state travel, the big issues that come through are what each state had its own restrictions and limits in terms of who can come and who can not go, and how to travel with somebody. And if you had been to a state that had high incidences of COVID, you weren't allowed to travel into certain areas for a while. And even within states, it was certain cities and areas within states at times. That you're kind of stuck with that, because that's another rule of law for that area that you've got to abide by. You still have to try to accomplish the order. So again, the court always says, come back to reasonableness. This isn't going to work because of circumstances. Offer make-up time. If you're afraid your child's going to go somewhere it's unsafe, offer the make-up time. Be proactive, not wait until it's on.
And that really ties into my next question, because if a parent's time has been denied by the other parent due to some COVID-19 concerns, can that parent get make-up parenting time? Do they have to go to court to get that awarded to them?
Well, they could go to the front. They could file a complaint with the front of the court. The front of the court will enforce only the orders as written. Now, if the parties have made agreements, the court will consider those agreements too when trying to wake up parenting time. They're going to again say what's reasonable. They're going to look at it as a snapshot and look into your life and say, hey, someone was COVID, they were sick and they were in the hospital or couldn't move for 3 days. If you can't work for 4 days because of how bad COVID was, and that happened to me personally, you can't take care of a child for 3 or 4 days. So you just have to, the exceptions and safety things have to be reasonable, and then that will solve things. But they will usually order make-up parenting time if it was totally outside of everybody's control.
Right. So one issue that I kept on hearing about over the past 18 months is for those parents that have supervised parenting time. There was, the supervised locations, if there was a facility that they were supposed to go to, those were all shut down. Now, thankfully, I think they're opening back up. But can you talk a little bit about those parents who had supervised parenting time and what parenting time was looking like for them during COVID?
Yes, the supervised parenting time, if you don't have a close friend that's trusted to help with that, you got to rely on a service or a volunteer, was tough even before COVID, was to find that. It was so much need for something like that. But with COVID, it became even worse because those places did shut down, and the options available were the same things they kind of did with Google. It was like Zoom, phone calls, and Zoom. The difficult part is you're sitting there trying to engage with your child, and the other parent may be there, and if you have a bad relationship with the other parent, it can cutting them short, didn't start on time.
They might be the supervisor one,
right,
which is very awkward.
Yeah.
But also Zoom parenting time is not ideal for especially young children. Right, it might be okay if you have a 10-year-old, but if you have a 4-year-old, not so.
Yeah,
not so much.
I often warn clients that Zoom parenting time, you've got to say about 1 minute for every year, and that's about how much attention span you're going to have with someone.
Wow.
So imagine going from every other weekend to, or even a few hours every other weekend to just a few minutes. It's got to be tough. And then you're at the mercy of internet's working and the other parent agreeing with you and working with you.
So do you have any closing advice for parents out there who have parenting time issues?
Well, my closing advice now is that, hey, flu season's coming, and I think there's going to be a spike with COVID related to that time of stuff too, because it's just the time of year for that stuff to grow. Plan for it. We already kind of hinting that schools might be moving back to stay at home. Someone might get COVID, someone might be quarantined. Make a plan in advance and offer make-up parenting time in advance.
Great. Thank you for those tips, Kent.
Thank you.
In the Name of Family Law is brought to you by Wood & Associates, PLLC.